Hey folks, we're going to be reading Animal Farm by George Orwell, released in 1945. Remember, this is an allegory. Everything is on the surface level about a farm with animals, but it's really about the communist revolution and communist Russia. It is also a fable. Like, the animals are going to talk. They're going to act like people, but they are animals. And so we've got that going on. We're going to be tracking rhetoric and the way that the animals use the rhetorical triangle when talking to each other, and logical fallacies and things like that. So we've got a lot that we're doing in this book that makes our study of this book a little bit more complex than what we were doing with Of Mice and Men. But we're also using all the same stuff that we used in Of Mice and Men. You want to think about the narrator, you want to think about the language being used, the figurative language, and allusions and all that kind of stuff that we've used before. We're building sequentially our understanding of more complicated works. Animal Farm is not enormously long. It's about 50% longer than than Of Mice and Men. And we'll go through it a little bit slower probably because we'll be doing some other things this quarter aside from just reading Animal Farm. So without further ado, though, I'm going to start us out and give you some analysis as we go through. So Animal Farm by George Orwell, Chapter 1. Mr. Jones of the Manor Farm had locked the hen houses for the night, but was too drunk to remember to shut the potholes. With the ring of light from his lantern dancing from side to side, he lurched across the yard, kicked off his boots at the back door, drew himself a last glass of beer from the barrel in the scullery, and made his way up to bed, where Mrs. Jones was already snoring. So our first image of the farmer, Mr. Jones, who is going to be representative of Tsar Nicholas and Manor Farm, which is, Tsarist Russia. He's an incompetent leader. He's drunk. He leaves the potholes open on the hen house. That means the foxes can get in and eat the hens. He's interested in drinking rather than ruling. As soon as the light in the bedroom went out, there was a stirring and a fluttering all through the farm buildings. Word had gone round during the day that old Major, the prize middle white boar, had had a strange dream on the previous night and wished to communicate it to the other animals. It had been agreed that they should all meet in the big barn as soon as Mr. Jones was safely out of the way. Old Major, so he was always called, though the name under which he had been exhibited was Willingdon Beauty, was so highly regarded on the farm that everyone was quite ready to lose an hour's sleep in order to hear what he had to say. So we've got a little bit of ethos with Old Major already. Old Major is going to be your Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin figure, and he's sort of the one who's going to start us off in this sort of revolution talk. At one end of the big barn, on a sort of raised platform, Major was already ensconced. There's some good vocab words here for you. On his bed of straw under a lantern which hung from a beam. He was 12 years old and had lately grown rather stout. But he was still a majestic-looking pig, with a wise and benevolent appearance in spite of the fact that his tushes had never been cut. Before long, the other animals began to arrive and make themselves comfortable after their different fashions. First came the three dogs, Bluebell, Jessie, and Pincher, then the pigs, who settled down on the straw immediately in front of the platform. The hens perched themselves on the windowsills, the pigeons fluttered up to the rafters, and the sheep and cows lay down behind the pigs and began to chew the cud. The two cart horses, Boxer and Clover, came in together, walking very slowly and setting down their vast hairy hooves with great care, lest there should be some small animal concealed in the straw. So this characterizes the two cart horses as caring about other animals, right? Now, they're going to represent the workers, the working class in a really, really strong way. Now, all animals represent the workers. They all represent the people in general. But work horses in particular represent sort of the Soviets, those groups of workers. And we'll continue with that in a second. I lost my spot. Let's see. Clover was a stout motherly mare approaching middle life who had never quite got her figure back after her fourth foal. Boxer was an enormous beast, nearly 18 hands high, and as strong as any two ordinary horses put together. A white stripe down his nose gave him a somewhat stupid appearance, and in fact, he was not of first-rate intelligence. That's direct characterization, right? We tell you he's stupid. Boxer's dumb, right? But again, representing the working class, powerful but dumb. It's kind of like some of the things people were saying about Lenny in the last book. Let's see. He was not of first-rate intelligence, but he was universally respected for his steadiness of character and tremendous powers of work. After the horses came Muriel, the white goat, and Benjamin, the donkey. Benjamin was the oldest animal on the farm and the worst tempered. He seldom talked, and when he did, it was usually to make some cynical remark. For instance, he would say that God had given him a tail to keep the flies off, but that he would sooner have had no tail and no flies. Alone among the animals on the farm, he never laughed. If asked why, he would say that he saw nothing to laugh at. Nevertheless, without openly admitting it, he was devoted to Boxer. The two of them usually spent their Sundays together in the small paddock beyond the orchard, grazing side by side and never speaking. So it's interesting that Benjamin, who's going to represent sort of the educated class, is somehow bound to the working class. He's bound to Boxer, the workhorse, and they like each other. But they never speak to each other. They just sort of coexist together in a way that's beneficial to both of them. And that may be a commentary as well. The two horses had just lain down when a brood of ducklings, which had lost their mother, filed into the barn, cheeping feebly and wandering from side to side to find some place where they would not be trodden on. Clover made a sort of wall round them with her great foreleg, and the ducklings nestled down inside it and promptly fell asleep. This tells you something about Clover as a character, too. That's indirect characterization about how she treats other animals. At the last moment, Molly, the foolish, pretty white mare who drew Mr. Jones's trap, came mincing daintily in, chewing at a lump of sugar. What does this tell you about Molly? She's got a lump of sugar. Who else has a lump of sugar? Nobody. She pulls Mr. Jones's carriage, and so she has a position of status. She represents sort of that upper class, not high enough to be the nobility, but certainly benefiting from her relationship with Farmer Jones. And you can already see that here. And look at the adjectives and the verbs that we've got coming in here. She's foolish. She's pretty. She comes mincing daintily in. I mean, you can sort of see her, coming in, really sort of unconcerned with other things. And you can see, look at the next sentence. She took a place near the front and began flirting her white mane, hoping to draw attention to the red ribbons it was plaited with. So she's got ribbons, and she's flirting in front of the other horses, showing off her status. Last of all came the cat. He's my favorite character, who looked round as usual for the warmest place and finally squeezed herself in between Boxer and Clover. There she purred contentedly through Major's speech without listening to a word of what he was saying. All of the animals were now present except Moses, the tame raven who slept on a perch behind the back door. When you hear the word Moses, of course, that's an allusion to Moses from the Bible and connects Moses to the church, which you're going to see pretty strongly here. Clearly, this raven represents the church and the church's connection, I would say, with the leaders of the country, the czars in that case at that time period. When Major saw that they had all made themselves comfortable and were waiting attentively, he cleared his throat and began. Comrades, you have heard already about the strange dream that I had last night, but I will come to the dream later. I have something else to say first. Do not think, comrades, that I shall be with you for many months longer. And before I die, I feel it my duty to pass on to you such wisdom as I have acquired. I've had a long life. I've had much time for thought as I lay alone in my stall, and I think I may say that I understand the nature of life on this earth as well as any animal now living. It is about this that I wish to speak to you. Now, comrades, note that there's no end quote on this paragraph. That means that Major's still speaking. It's an example of a monologue, a really long, uninterrupted speech made by one character to other characters. Now, comrades, what is the nature of this life of ours? Let us face it, our lives are miserable, laborious, and short. We are born, we are given just so much food as will keep the breath in our bodies, and those of us who are capable of it are forced to work to the last atom of our strength, and the very instant that our usefulness has come to an end, we are slaughtered with hideous cruelty. No animal in England knows the meaning of happiness or leisure after he's a year old. No animal in England is free. The life of an animal is misery and slavery. That is the plain truth. Now, of course, animals represent workers and the humans represent the upper class. So we want to be able to analyze what Major's saying here. He's saying that, in Russia, all these people were serfs, essentially slaves who worked the farms. And as soon as they came of age and were able to work, they had to work, and they worked their whole lives, and they never were able to own anything. They never were able to have anything of their own. And then when they died, that was that. And so it's a pretty clear one-to-one allegory of what he's saying, but he's certainly starting to make an argument. But is this simply part of the order of nature? Is it because this land of ours is so poor that it cannot afford a decent life to those who dwell upon it? No, comrades, 1,000 times no. The soil of England is fertile. Its climate is good. It is capable of affording food in abundance to an enormously greater number of animals than now inhabit it. This single farm of ours would support 12 horses, 20 cows, hundreds of sheep, and all of them living in comfort and dignity that are now almost beyond our imagining. Why then do we continue in this miserable condition? Because nearly the whole of the produce of our labor is stolen from us by human beings. There, comrades, is the answer to all our problems. It is summed up in a single word: man. Man is the only real enemy we have. Remove man from the scene, and the root cause of hunger and overwork is abolished forever. And again, what he's saying here is that the farms produce plenty of food to feed all the farmers who are living on them, and people could have a pretty good lifestyle, but there are these rich people that take almost everything that comes out of it. And this is true of any factory, of any industry. You've got a CEO who's making lots of money, and the poor workers at the bottom of the rung aren't making very much at all, and investors are making lots of money. Shouldn't the workers who are actually doing the work be making more money? This is sort of the argument that he's making, and it's a basic tenet or argument of communism. He's going to continue. Man is the only creature that consumes without producing. He does not give milk. He does not lay eggs. He is too weak to pull the plow. He cannot run fast enough to catch rabbits, yet he is lord of the animals. He sets them to work. He gives them back the bare minimum that will prevent them from starving, and then the rest he keeps for himself. Our labor tills the soil, our dung fertilizes it, and yet there is not one of us that owns more than his bare skin. You cows that I see before me, how many thousands of gallons of milk have you given during the last year? And what has happened to that milk, which should have been breeding up sturdy calves? Every drop of it has gone down the throats of our enemies. And you, hens, how many eggs have you laid in this last year? And how many of those eggs have ever hatched into chickens? The rest have all gone to market to bring in money for Jones and his men. And you, Clover, where are those 4 foals you bore, who should have been the support and pleasure of your old age? Each was sold at a year old, and you will never see one of them again. In return for your 4 confinements and all your labor in the field, what have you ever had except your bare rations and a stall? Relatively good use of rhetorical question here. What do any of the animals have? And think about the comparisons. If this is an allegory, what do the various classes of animals sort of represent? And, the work that they do. Think about a factory worker. How many things have they produced, and what do they have for it at the end of their lives? And so on and so forth. And even the miserable lives we lead are not allowed to reach their natural span. For myself, I do not grumble, for I am one of the lucky ones. I am 12 years old and have had over 400 children. Holy crap. Such is the natural life of a pig. But no animal escapes the cruel knife in the end. You young porkers who are sitting in front of me, every one of you will scream your lives out at the block within a year. To that horror we all must come. Cows, pigs, hens, sheep, everyone. Even the horses and the dogs have no better fate. You, boxer, the very day those great muscles of yours lose their power, Jones will sell you to the knacker, who will cut your throat and boil you down for the foxhounds. As for the dogs, when they grow old and toothless, Jones ties a brick round their necks and drowns them in the nearest pond. Is it not crystal clear, then? Comrades. Interesting how he uses comrades. That's a very communist word, right? Like we tend to associate it with Russia. It literally means friends or equals or brothers, that kind of a thing. So in his appeal to the other animals, he's putting them all on equal terms. They're all comrades. They're all in this together, even though it seems like Old Major himself is the one who's kind of in charge. Is it not it crystal clear then, comrades, that all the evils of this life of ours spring from the tyranny of human beings. Tyranny is an important word too. Tyranny is the root of tyrant. Somebody who's in charge, who doesn't deserve to be in charge, who took charge sort of against the rules. That's what a tyrant is. And he's calling human beings tyrants. We're all animals, right? Humans and animals are all animals together. What makes the humans able to rule over the rest of the animals? Same thing could be said about various classes. We're all human. What makes the rich able to rule over the poor? That's a pretty good argument. I mean, it's pretty convincing. And I think Orwell's able to write such a convincing argument because he was a communist. He was a socialist. He really wanted this thing to happen. And he's showing us the ideals here. And the ideals are certainly not bad when you look at it the way that old Major is putting it. So let's keep reading. I just lost my spot. Only get rid of man, and the produce of our labor would be our own. Almost overnight we can become rich and free. What, then, must we do? Why, work night and day, body and soul, for the overthrow of the human race. That is my message to you, comrades. Rebellion! I do not know when the rebellion will come. It might be in a week or 100 years. But I know, as surely as I see the straw beneath my feet, that sooner or later justice will be done. Fix your eyes on that, comrades, throughout the short remainder of your lives, and above all, pass on this message of mine to those who come after you, so that future generations shall carry on the struggle until it is victorious. And remember, comrades, your resolution must never falter. No argument must lead you astray. Never listen when they tell you that man and the animals have a common interest, that the prosperity of the one is the prosperity of the others. It is all lies. Man serves the interest of no creature except himself. And among us animals, let there be perfect unity, perfect comradeship in the struggle. All men are enemies. All animals are comrades. So again, let's translate this in terms of the allegory of what he's saying. The rich will often tell the poor that they're all in this together, that if the rich get rich, they'll help the poor get wealthier too. He says that's all lies. The rich serve the interests of one group of people, themselves. They don't care about anyone else. And so he says all men are enemies. All the rich, all the upper class are enemies. All animals are comrades. All workers, whether they work in the fields or the factories, we're all in this together, right? At this moment, there was a tremendous uproar. While Major was speaking, 4 large rats had crept out of their holes and were sitting on their hindquarters, listening to him. The dogs had suddenly caught sight of them, and it was only by a swift dash for their holes that the rats saved their lives. Major raised his trotter for silence. "Comrades," he said, "here is a point that must be settled. The wild creatures such as rats and rabbits, are they our friends or our enemies? Let us put it to the vote. I propose this question to the meeting. Are rats comrades?" It's an interesting question. The rats represent wild animals. So what about people who aren't workers? What about people who are sort of outside the bounds of the traditional workers? Are they friends or enemies? And of course, he's putting it to a vote. This is showing this is a will of the people kind of a thing rather than somebody deciding from the top. The vote was taken at once, and it was agreed by an overwhelming majority that the rats were comrades. There were only 4 dissensions, the 3 dogs and the cat, who was afterwards discovered to have voted on both sides. Major continued. "I have little more to say. I merely repeat, remember, always your duty of enmity, means hatred, towards man and all his ways. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. And remember also that in fighting against man we must not come to resemble him. Even when you have conquered him, do not adopt his vices. No animal must ever live in a house, or sleep in a bed, or wear clothes, or drink alcohol, or smoke tobacco, or touch money, or engage in trade." That seems like a comprehensive list. So once we overthrow the rich, we shouldn't make our own upper class within ourselves, is essentially what he's saying here. All the habits of man are evil, And above all, no animal must ever tyrannize over his own kind. Weak or strong, clever or simple, we are all brothers. No animal must ever kill any other animal. All animals are equal. And now, comrades, I will tell you about my dream of last night. I cannot describe that dream to you. It was a dream of the earth as it will be when man is vanished. But it reminded me of something that I had long forgotten. Many years ago, when I was a little pig, my mother and the other sows used to sing an old song, of which they knew only the tune and the first 3 words. I had known that tune in my infancy, but it had long since passed out of my mind. Last night, however, it came back to me in my dream, and what is more, the words of the song also came back. Words, I am certain, which were sung by the animals of long ago and have been lost to memory for generations. I will sing you that song now, comrades. I am old and my voice is hoarse, but when I have taught you the tune, you can sing it better for yourselves. It is called Beasts of England. Interesting. Beasts of England, of course, would be workers of England. Now, England represents sort of the whole world in this story. The story takes place in England, but England is sort of the location of Animal Farm. And so in the same way that the world is the location of Russia. Old Major cleared his throat and began to sing. As he had said, his voice was hoarse, but he sang well enough, and it was a stirring tune, something between Clementine and La Cucaracha. The words ran, now, you know when... Is that the end of it? No, there's one more verse on the next page. You know when the author takes the time to write an entire song down and all of its lyrics, it's going to be important, and we're going to have to analyze it. Because Orwell took the time to write it for us. So I'm going to, as much as I hate to say I'm going to do this, I'm going to sing it for you. I am not a singer. Just a disclaimer. I am so bad at singing that when I was in church as a kid trying to sing hymns, my mom would laugh at me. That is wrong on all kinds of levels. Your mother shouldn't laugh at you, and she especially shouldn't do it in church. But whatever, it's true. So I'm going to try and sing you this song, and then we're going to go back and we're going to look through the various verses and see what's going on rhetorically, what's going on symbolically, how this song is supposed to affect the animals, and how we're supposed to translate it as readers to understand what's going on. But here we go. Beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and clime, hearken to my joyful tidings of the golden future time. Soon or late the day is coming, tyrant man shall be o'erthrown, and the fruitful fields of England shall be trod by beasts alone. Rings shall vanish from our noses, and the harness from our back. Bit and spur shall rust forever, cruel whips no more shall crack. Riches more than mine can picture, wheat and barley, oat and hay, clover, beans, and mangel wurzels shall be ours upon that day. Mangel wurzels? Turns out I looked that up. It's beets. I don't know why beets were called mangel wurzels, but apparently that's another name for them. That's another connection to Russia, though, of course. You know, Russians are famous for eating beets and making borscht and stuff like that. Anyway, I guess I gotta finish this thing for you. Bright will shine the fields of England, pure shall its waters be, sweeter yet shall blow its breezes on the day that sets us free. For that day we all must labor, though we die before it break. Cows and horses, geese and turkeys, all must toil for freedom's sake. Beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and clime, hearken well and spread my tidings of the golden future time. Thank you. I will, open up a tip jar and you guys can all, no, I'm kidding. But let's analyze the song. I mean, it's a pretty catchy tune. You're going to be whistling it for days. But here we go. Beasts of England, beasts of Ireland. Now we're talking about the whole British Isles here is a sort of a symbol for the world. But beasts would be workers. So workers of the world. Beasts of every land and clime. Workers of every land and climate. Hearken to my joyful tidings of the golden future time. We use hearken as listen, and tidings are like news, the news of a golden future time. This future time is golden because gold is symbolic of perfection, right? This perfect future that is going to come. He says, sooner or late the day is coming. So here he tells you that This communist utopia, this happy future is inevitable. It's coming soon or late, but eventually it will be here. Tyrant man shall be overthrown. We're going to overthrow the rich. We're going to overthrow human beings on a surface level, the rich on a symbolic level. And the fruitful fields of England shall be trod by beasts alone. We're talking about a land that's ruled entirely by animals, no humans at all. Of course, no rich at all. We're talking about a classless society where workers are all equal. Rings shall vanish from our noses. Well, animals have rings in their noses so that they can be pulled by human beings. It's sort of a means of control, and so that means of control is going to be removed. And the harness from our back. So all these animals which are harnessed to do work for human beings, all that harness, which is a means of control, is going to be removed. Bit and spur shall rust forever. A bit is something that we use to control a horse. A spur is something we stab the horse to make it go faster. Cruel whips no more shall crack. So we look at the means of, like forcing animals into labor for the benefit of human beings. All of those are going to be gone. We've got the society where none of those things are occurring anymore. So we're going to get rid of the classes in society, he says. We're going to get rid of the enslavement of the poor doing bidding for the rich. And then we shift gears in this next stanza. We start talking about the wealth and how we're going to redistribute the wealth to everybody. Riches more than mind can picture, wheat and barley, oats and hay. Now, this is riches not in terms of money, but in terms of food, in terms of everybody having enough food and comforts. Clover, beans, and mango wurzels, remember those are beets, shall be ours upon that day. So the animals will no longer be starving. There'll be an equality in terms of food and provisions. Now, food, of course, is sort of money to an animal. When you think about it, they don't have any use for cash, but they do have use for food. Bright will shine the fields of England, purer shall its waters be, sweeter yet shall blow the breezes on the days that sets us free. This is all hyperbole. There is nothing that is going to make the waters magically more pure when they're free. The idea is that the freedom makes them appreciate the water more. The freedom makes them appreciate the breeze more. Somehow being free is going to increase their quality of life exponentially. And all of that's hyperbole. It's not based on fact, but this is an emotional appeal. We all want that freedom. We're all excited for it. So then he says, for that day we all must labor. So now the song says we got to work to make this happen. It's not going to happen on its own. It seemed like it earlier, right? It was like sooner or later it's going to come. But now he's like, we got to work to make this day happen. And we may die before it happens. It may happen after our own deaths. But we got to dedicate our lives to freedom, to escape from the rule of mankind. Cows and horses, geese and turkeys, all must toil for freedom's sake. So the idea here is that we're all in this together. It doesn't matter whether you're a cow or a horse or a goose or a turkey. We're all in here. We're all working together to achieve freedom. And then we have the last line, which is sort of a bookend of the first one, but there's a key difference. This one says, beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and clime, so far the same. Hearken well and spread the tidings of the golden future time. So at the end of the song, there's a call to spread the news. It's not just Animal Farm that's going to rebel, it's the whole world, and we need to spread it to the rest of the world too. So it's a catchy song, right? And now that we've analyzed it, you can sort of see allegorically what it means. The singing of this song threw the animals into the wildest excitement. Almost before Major had reached the end, they had begun singing it for themselves. I just lost my spot. Oh, this is the end of the chapter. Even the stupidest of them had already picked up the tune and a few of the words, and as for the clever ones, such as the pigs and dogs, they had the entire song by heart within a few minutes. And then, after a few preliminary tries, the whole farm burst out into Beasts of England in tremendous unison. The cows lowed it. The dogs whined it. The sheep bleated it. The horses whinnied it. The ducks quacked it. They were so delighted with the song that they sang it right through 5 times in succession, and might have continued singing it all night if they had not been interrupted. Unfortunately, the uproar awoke Mr. Jones, who sprang out of bed, making sure that there was a fox in the yard. He seized the gun, which always stood in the corner of his bedroom, and let fly a charge of number 6 shot into the darkness. The pellets buried themselves in the wall of the barn, and the meeting broke up hurriedly. Everyone fled to his own sleeping place. The birds jumped on their perches, the animals settled down in the straw, and the whole farm was asleep in a moment. Now, that's hyperbole, too. They weren't really asleep, right? Like, they just pretended to be asleep, like you do when your parents yell at you, "You better be asleep." You're like, like that's exactly what the animals are doing. But Jones heard this, got nervous about it, and came out with a gun and fired. If a gun symbolizes the military and Jones symbolizes the upper class, this is sort of civil unrest, right? And you can go back to that February Revolution if you go back to the Russian history video that we already watched. So we're done with chapter 1, and that's going to be it for the day. And it's just sort of your introduction to Animal Farm. But you can see how we have these animals talking like human beings. We have the allegory. We've set up the reasoning for the animal rebellion and why the animals want freedom and to control themselves. And we're able to look at it simultaneously as a story about animals on a farm and about people in pre-communist Russia and their longing for their own free state where they have some control of their lives. And I think it's a really persuasive and well-written chapter. So we'll continue on next time. We'll meet some new animals and see if this revolution gets carried out or not on Animal Farm. Thanks.